there any chance of there being a broad front across all the Dáil parties, excluding Fianna Fáil for reasons I will explain in a moment, actually going back to the IMF and the ECB and saying, sorry, we cannot wear this. But this would be right across the parties, from the United Left Alliance right across into Fine Gael, saying this is just not sustainable, we cannot do it. The reason I don't think Fianna Fáil have any role to play is that every single time they came up against the banks, whether it was in September 2008 or whether it was against the ECB and the IMF, they flunked it. They just folded down completely and said, whatever you say, we go with. That is part of the reason we're in this present mess. So Fianna Fáil just have to be got rid of altogether. They're a nuisance. They're a destructive nuisance. But everybody else can maybe come together to some kind of broad consensus and say, if you don't do this as a negotiated deal with us across the Dáil, then you're going to see what happened in Egypt happening on the streets of Dublin as people go out saying, we cannot wear this.
With regard to the IMF loan, the interest rate being charged by the IMF is a standard rate of interest. It was not a penal rate particularly applied to Ireland. If any country applied to the IMF, they would be paying exactly the same rate of interest. I think you agree with that, just on a factual basis. Secondly, the rate of interest being charged by the European Union is too high, I accept that. But it is also, by the way, and please don't be deceived by people calling to your doors and saying otherwise, because I've studied this very, very closely. I'm on the European Affairs Committee in the Dáil, and we had an expert in to talk about the interest rate. It comes from the EFSF, I forget what that stands for, but it was a mechanism set up in the European Union at a council meeting approximately 8 or 9 months ago. And so anyone who applied for funding under that programme would be given a standard rate of interest. So to somehow imply that Ireland has been penalised, that somehow Europe has taken out a big rolling pin, hit Ireland over the head and said you're going to pay extra, is simply not true. Both the IMF and the EU loan have been done at standard rates of interest. Now, I will agree with regard to the European loan, and I actually put a motion down on the European Affairs Committee on this. It is too high and it is unfair. It is true to say that the mechanism itself, it makes a profit because they're borrowing it at one level and they're lending it out to Ireland at a different level. Their rationale for making that profit is that so more funds will be available in the central fund to help other countries. I personally believe, with or without Fianna Fáil, but I personally believe there will be a pan-European and all-European look at that situation, including asking some of the banks to participate in a readjustment of that.
It is a penal rate that Ireland has been charged, and it just shows the absolute failure of Fianna Fáil to negotiate any deal, despite the fact. Well, it's 3% over the odds. No, it's 3% over the odds of any other country who got a similar deal, if you want to call it a deal. We're not the first in total. Go to Greece.
Everybody gets their
Go to Greece if you want to have a check and look at the international. Well, I'm having the debate. If you're interrupting me, that's not a debate. The other thing is that we cannot afford the interest charges, never mind the repayments on the IMF ECB loan. We can barely afford, as you have already stated, to pay the day-to-day expenditure of the state. We can agree, or most of the country seems to agree, that we need to end the IMF deal as quickly as possible. My view is that we shouldn't draw down the money, we should return the money, and that there is enough wealth, and I've already argued that. The only way that we can do that is if Ireland manages to get the confidence back in the market. And the reason why the international markets have no confidence in Ireland at the moment is because we have no job creation strategy, we have no predictions into the future. There is increased unemployment. With increased unemployment, that means there's less people paying tax. The local economies are starting to collapse, which means that you have less returns. And that's where the biggest problem is. The international markets do not see hope in the strategies being pursued by this government and being supported by some of the other parties. And that's where we need to correct our economy. Once you correct that, then you can go forward, and then you can go on to the international markets or wherever to get money. And and at least you have the confidence not only of the international markets but Irish people as well.
First of all, Michael, again, the banking crisis is now largely under control. I think you're in the minority of that one, on that one there, Michael, because, Anglo-Irish Bank was going to cost us 4 billion, 34 billion. Alan Dukes was talking about 50 billion last week. Look, it's a black hole, and we don't know how black it's going to get. The IMF, by the way, the country that they rate the worst in the world for doing business in at the moment, of whatever it is, 200 countries, is Iceland. I wonder why that is, because the Icelanders told them what to go and do with their programme. I bring it all back again. I don't know, I'm not an expert in finance. I bring it all back again to what went wrong. We have a dysfunctional department of finance, and, there's a great saying in life, never make the same mistake twice. And what I want out of all this is the security that this won't happen again. And I'm not seeing that at the moment. And if our Department of Finance isn't up to doing the job and keeps kowtowing to the banks, there are 70 million people of Irish descent living around the world. We can get some of them in to replace them. But you change what you can change, and what you can't change, there's nothing you can do. That's what I want to say. I want to know that this won't happen again. And at the moment, I'm not seeing that from anyone.